Okay, so now we are on record. Today we are looking at causal reasoning. Last week we had looked at we were discussing inductive reasoning, and I think I had mentioned last week that causal reasoning is a form is a type of inductive reasoning. Uh, so, but before we start, I had sent you a video of last week's class for Group 17. So the rest of the groups have to watch Group 17 because that of the other groups was not audible. The voice wasn't coming through. So only Group 17 had a good voice. So what it means is that you all have to use the video, sorry, the video audio recording of Group 17 last week. This is the way we read about issues. At this point, you are supposed to have trained yourself on the procedures of deductive and inductive reasoning. So these are two forms of reasoning we've discussed in the last 2 weeks. So today we're looking at causal reasoning. Yeah, so this is a form of inductive reasoning that focuses on causal relationships. Yeah. A type of inductive reasoning that focuses on causal relationships. It is reasoning from cause to effect and sometimes from effect to cause. So what causes what? How do we know it is the cause? Now we have to begin by understanding different senses of the word cause. When you say cause, there are different senses. So let's look at them, one by one. The different senses of the word cause. Well, the first one is the proximate cause. This is the immediate cause of something, even if that thing has more remote and foundational cause. So the proximate cause and the immediate cause of something. So an example, a quick one. Samson decided to become an armed robber. They put him in a situation where he engaged in a shootout with the police, and the police killed him. So here, someone died, Samson. The immediate cause of Samson's death is a shootout with the police. A shootout with the police. That's the proximate cause of Samson's death. Now, this is important because it helps us to see some other kinds of causes. Now, let's look at contributory cause. A cause among many other causes. Contributory, is a word that tells you that, something is contributing among others. Example, a distressed economy contributed to Samson's decision to become an armed robber and hence to end up being killed by the police. A distressed economy contributed to Samson's decision to be an armed robber. So, although Samson died from gunshot wounds in a shootout with the police, there are other causes of that death. One of them is a distressed economy. Because in this particular example, Samson wouldn't have become an armed robber in a better economy. So we're assuming that in this particular case, what drove Samson to be an armed robber were, basic, basic wants like hunger, lack of money, and related economic shortages. There are some countries where you don't experience such shortages if you are a citizen. So a distressed economy contributed to Samson's death. Okay. We have necessary cause or cause as necessary condition. When something is a necessary condition for another thing, without it, the other will not exist. Example, without oxygen, life is impossible. All right. So something is necessary when it is required for something else. It's a requirement. You can't do without it. Then you have sufficient cause or cause and sufficient condition. Something could be a sufficient condition for an effect if the presence of that thing is adequate for the presence of the effect. Um, one does not need to express doubt at seeing the effect when she sees the condition. And someone is raising a hand. Okay, I think the transcription is on. So let's pull it off. Perpetua has her hand raised. So Perpetua, do you have an issue to sort out right now at this point? Okay. So we're talking about sufficient cause. Something could be a sufficient condition for an effect if the presence of that thing is adequate for the presence of the effect. One does not need to express doubt at seeing the effect when she sees the condition. So seeing the condition alone knows that the effect is guaranteed. Just seeing the cause tells you the effect will be there. The effect will come. Example, to be prevented from inhaling oxygen for 20 minutes is sufficient cause for death. So there is a maximum time a human being can hold out without oxygen. If that time is exceeded, then you can be sure that the life will be lost. So that kind of deprivation is sufficient. For them. So the idea of sufficiency or the idea of sufficient cause is that the cause is adequate for the effect. If you see the cause, you know the effect must follow. Let's look at another example of sufficient cause, proving that a healthy and sane person calculatedly committed a murder is an adequate condition for sentencing the person to life imprisonment if this is the appropriate sentencing for such a crime in that jurisdiction. So assuming that life imprisonment is a punishment for homicide, and you are able to prove that someone who committed such a crime is, first of all, healthy, and secondly, is not insane. So the two are supposed to ensure the sentencing, the penalty, which is life in prison. So sufficiency. But let's compare sufficient cause to necessary cause so that the two kinds of causes will emerge clearly. Now, we can say there are several individually necessary conditions for an effect. There could be several individually necessary conditions for an effect. And a combination of all those conditions becomes sufficient for the effect. An effect, in other words, an effect could have several necessary conditions. They have to come together and combine to form a sufficient condition. In life and in science, it's usually difficult to determine what number of causes are sufficient for an effect to occur. Okay, so let's look at an example. Oxygen, water, food, and health are independently necessary conditions for a human being to stay alive. But these conditions and some other factors we may not know yet are sufficient for staying alive. So, oxygen is necessary to stay alive. Water is necessary to stay alive. Food is necessary. Health is necessary for staying alive. But none of them is sufficient. None of them is sufficient for staying alive. Now, combining them still does not guarantee life because we are not sure if they are enough for life. So this is where you are supposed to see the difference between necessary and sufficient cause. That a cause is necessary doesn't mean it's sufficient. All right. Let's look at probabilistic cause. Probabilistic cause. Now this is the opposite of necessary cause. Probabilistic is the opposite of necessary cause. So this kind of cause is theoretically not necessary. It is not a must for the effect. So probabilistic. Example, a crisis within economy, the lack of a job, the need to marry and settle down are probable causes of something's decision to become an armed robber. So a bad economy, unemployment, these are causes of something's decision to be an armed robber. But we don't see them as necessary causes because they must not be caused. Some of experience them, but we did not end up armed robbers. So that's why we call them probable cause. They are opposite of necessary cause. They don't need to cause someone to be an armed robber, but they could cause in some cases. Then we have causal agent. A causal agent is also a cause. So when we talk about causal agent, you are referring to living organisms like human beings. Clement is the cause of the crisis. John is the reason why I came late. So when it is human beings, then you call it you call that causal agent. Then we have causal sin and causal work. Now causal sin is when there are many causes, each one leading to another. When there are many causes, each one of them leading to another. So that's why you have the picture of a chain. And causal web is when the relationship between causes is more like a web than a chain. Now, two contributory causes could occur simultaneously. So in the case of causal web, you could have two several contributory causes occurring at the same time. That's when it becomes causal web. You can't call that causal chain. We need to see examples of the causal web and causal chain. Let's begin with an example of causal chain. Samson graduated but could not find a job. That's one. Two, he attempted self-employment but did not show enough determination to succeed in his chosen craft. That's two. Then he went to a bar one day and met a friend who introduced him to a gang. Samson agreed to join a gang because he was hungry and out of cash. So he joined the gang and became an armed robber. Then four, he and his gang had a number of successful raids, but on one of those escapades, they ran into the police. Then five, there was a shootout and Samson was hit. And then seven, Samson was rushed to the hospital where he died from gunshot wounds. We see this chain of events as a causal chain because you can see from this example that one thing led to another. One thing led to another. Okay. An example of causal web. It could be that the police officer who killed Samson did so because he, the officer, aimed his gun correctly, while his colleagues did not. And at the same time, Samson got killed because he squeezed the trigger to kill the police person before the police person, killed him. but found that there were no more bullets in the firing chamber of his gun. Now, so all these things were happening at the same time. That's why we call it a causal web. Samson wanted to shoot a police officer, and the same officer wanted to shoot Samson. They aimed at each other and pulled their triggers at the time. But why Samson died is because there were bullets in the policeman's gun. And why the policeman was not killed is that there were no bullets in Samson's gun. Okay, so let's look at some exercises to refresh our minds before we move on. Okay, so I can trace Nanado's victory all the way to an advice Father giving when this is an example of what. So, is anyone willing to tackle this question? So, if you want to answer, you can raise your hand. Shadrach, you can go ahead. Put on your microphone.
Contributory cost. Contributory cost.
Contributory. Yeah, that's a good attempt. Any other attempt? There's another result. Samson. Yeah, so Samson before. If Samson is not okay, so let's remark on that quickly. Now, when you see some of these questions, you have to study the structure of the question closely. Study it closely. In this case, you can see the phrase. There's a phrase inserted into the sentence. All the way. All the way. Now, the phrase all the way should intimate you that this is a causal thing. The phrase all the way. So, although there are several possible answers, but that phrase will let you know the particular answer that might be intended. Okay, so let's look at another one. USA had a hand in the outing and killing of Patrick Lumumba. This is an example of what? So someone answer that quickly. Yeah, a quick answer so that we go to the next question. Yeah, so Stacy, can you answer that?
Contributory.
Yeah, that's fine. So when you look at the question, you see the phrase has a hand. The phrase has a hand. That should give you clues. So remember that you need to study questions very well. Study the question very closely. You need to at least pay a house rent if you wish to live in that house. You need to at least pay your house rent if you wish to live in that house. Yeah, the son of the DC. Can you answer that? You need to unmute your mic.
Necessary cause.
That's it. Yeah, so you must have seen the phrase at least. You must have seen the phrase at least. So at least should intimate you, what the answer is. At least. Are you aware that the lady you dated, the reason why you did not do well in your exam is an example of what? Yeah, so that's your income.
Causal agent.
Yes, Stacy, go ahead. Your mic is on.
Causal agent.
Okay, good. That's causal agent. Causal agent. Good. Now let's read it. A lot of factors contributed to the emergence of the idea of multiculturalism. First of all, World War II ended with the defeat of the Nazis, who wanted to conquer the world and put everyone under a single ideology. Second, it was the era of independence, and most former colonies were acquiring their independence, which was a message of equality and mutual tolerance. Then thirdly, African Americans in America were demanding for respect and equal treatment. And fourth, the United Nations had made a declaration for the fundamental human rights. So we have four different developments, and they all contributed to the emergence of the idea of multiculturalism. So what is the answer? Samson.
Jane.
Come again. Come again. You said it is what?
Causal chain.
Causal chain. Now remember that causal chain is when a number of causes, are lined up, one leading to the other. So, does this look like causal chain?
Causal web. Hey.
Okay, so causal web.
Causal web. Causal,
Yeah. So you can see that the different factors are happening at once. The different factors are happening at the same time. So the answer should be causal web. When you look at this example, each of these developments are not short events. Each of them is actually a long event. The end of the World War, the defeat of the Nazis, that happened over a period. And then the era of independence. That happened over 10, 15, or 20 years. 10, 15, 20 years. That was the era of independence. So that took a long time to happen. And then the demand for respect by African Americans, that took place a long time. So these factors Each of these factors took a long time. So that means they were happening alongside. They were happening side by side. So they were happening at the same time. So that tells you the answer. She died because she drank a heavy dose of poison. So please answer that quickly. Shadrach.
Sufficient cause.
Yeah, so that's correct. Sufficient cause. Now we are done with the senses of the word cause. So we've seen the various sense of that word. It's time to look at the topic, the main topic. Causal reason. How we reason in causal ways. Now, causal reasoning is a type of inductive argument attempting to establish a causal relationship between phenomena or events. Okay? A type of inductive argument attempting to establish a causal relationship between phenomena or events. Now, a causal claim indicates that something causes another. When you make a causal claim, you are indicating that something causes another. A causal hypothesis is an initial speculation made in relation to a causal claim. A supposition that offers a starting point for further investigation. So, so we are supposed to be studying two things. First of all, the various informal causal reasoning strategies for arriving at causal claims. The various informal causal reasoning strategies for arriving at causal claims. How do we arrive at causal claims? How are we able to make causal claims in the first place? By what processes do we arrive at our causal claims? What enables us to say that this caused this caused that? So that's a various informal causal reasoning strategy. There are certain ways our minds have been based to identify causes. We call them the informal causal reasoning strategy. And then we're also supposed to be studying various releasing noise. So let me get followed. Okay, so we are supposed to be looking at various informal causal strategies and also various experimental strategies for confirming causal hypothesis. But that one is not for this semester. What we'll just see right now are some informal causal reasoning strategies. Now, John Stuart Mill, in his book titled The System of Logic, has found, espoused 5 approaches for detecting causation by observation. 5 approaches, but we shall look at only 3 of them. Now, so we'll look at relevant difference reasoning. That's the first strategy. Relevant difference reasoning, common thread reasoning, and then a concomitant variation reasoning. So these are the 3 kinds of informal causal reasoning strategies we shall discuss right now. So we'll begin with the relevant difference reasoning. This is a method of reasoning that identifies something that occurs differently from others as a cause of an effect. This is a method of reasoning that identifies something that occurs differently from others as the cause of an effect. So, for example, A is a difference among others. So, A causes the effect. A is a difference among others. So, A caused the effect. Now, let's discuss an example. A common example in your textbook. I've always taken tea and bread for my breakfast, but on a certain day last month, I fell sick shortly after my breakfast. So I take tea and bread for my breakfast all the time, but on this particular day, I fell sick after breakfast. Now I treated the illness and fell sick again last week after my breakfast. In other words, after treating the illness, I fell sick again after breakfast. And then I asked myself why I've fallen sick on these two occasions after breakfast. And then it occurs to me that on these two occasions, I had taken a particular product, a marmalade, with a breakfast. So I go to the kitchen and check the information provided on the product container. And then I saw that the product had expired a long time ago. So I suspect that this is the reason why I've fallen sick twice after breakfast. Now, since I've always taken tea and bread without any implications, it means or it suggests that the expired product becomes the difference, the relevant difference in explaining the possible cause of the illness. In this particular example, I have a lifelong breakfast, and that's tea and bread. Lifelong means that it doesn't cause me sickness every day. But all of a sudden, it causes me, I felt ill after a certain breakfast. And after treating myself, I fell ill again after another breakfast. And then I decided to scrutinize the breakfast to see why I've fallen ill after two of such. And then I realized that there is a product I bought from the local supermarket to help me enjoy my slices of bread. So I go to check the container of that product, and I saw that the product has expired. And so that product, the expired product, seems to be what has been causing the illness. Now it is very clear that tea and bread don't cause me illness. And that's why they are lifelong habits. So it suggested that whatever is causing the illness is something different. And then eventually I found it. So it is the difference that is relevant to explaining the illness. That's why we call it relevant difference. Now let's look at the next one, common thread reasoning. Common thread. Now this is a method of reasoning that identifies something that occurred in all the instances that have led to a particular effect. A method of reasoning that identifies something that occurred in all the instances that have led to a particular effect. So, for example, A is a common thread among all the events. A is a common thread among all the events. So, A is the cause. Okay, so, let's see another example. When I bought the expired product some months ago, I had gone shopping in the company of my neighbors, and we had all bought the same stock of marmalade, which expired at the same time. So assume my neighbors are equally sick. They all trace the cause of their illnesses to the same product. It means we have all identified the expired product as the common thread in all the cases of this particular illness in the neighborhood. So you can easily see why this product becomes a common thread. Now, we have seen that it's not just me some other people are having the same problem, and then if we identify the same product as responsible for the problems of all these people, then we can call that product a common thread running through all the cases of this problem. And then the third one is the concomitant variation. Now, this is a method of identifying the degree of occurrence of something. The method of identifying the degree of occurrence of something rather than its simple presence or absence. So this one is about the degree of the occurrence of something. It's not about whether it's present or not. It is assumed that it's always present. So this is for causes that are always present. Now, we use this method when we cannot eliminate a particular cause from the environment. Example, carbon dioxide. When we cannot eliminate a particular cause from the environment, then we have to use this method. It is useless to use relevant difference to identify carbon dioxide as a cause of ill health. So we use a method that measures its degree or intensity. If we were to trace the cause of a problem to carbon dioxide or to some other aspect of the atmosphere, it doesn't make sense to say you can use a method that presupposes it can be eliminated from the atmosphere. It cannot be eliminated from the atmosphere. So you can't use methods that presupposes you can eliminate it. You have to use a method that measures its degree of intensity. Now, being in the atmosphere all the time means that carbon dioxide can be healthy or at least can cohabit with human health. So the presence of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not necessarily a problem. The problem becomes its degree or intensity in the atmosphere. So that is why a method like the concomitant variation is very relevant. Okay, let's look at another example. It was revealed through research that high blood pressure is exacerbated in regions whose soils have low levels of selenium. Now, this is a metal that exists in tiny quantities in every soil, and because of this, we cannot measure for its absence or presence. We can only account for the effect of varying degrees of it, and then the discovery that it seems correlated with the ability of our body to keep our blood pressure normal. Now, there's a metal called selenium, which is present in every soil. Scientists have found a relationship between that metal and high blood pressure. And scientists found that in areas where there are a lot of cases of high blood pressure, the presence of selenium in the soil is too small. So this method is not something you can call relevant or common thread. It's concomitant variation, because whether you like it or not, selenium in every soil. Another example, it was discovered that high levels of sulfur dioxide pollution in the air was responsible for the high rate of death in London between November and December 1952. Now, there's no way to eliminate sulfur dioxide from the air. The experiment rather discovered the causal connection by comparing the increase and decrease in the effect, which is the number of deaths per day, to the variation in the degrees of sulfur dioxide seen in the air. Now, sulfur dioxide is also another chemical in the air, another form of gas in the atmosphere. It could be more in certain places than others. In industrial cities, for instance, it could be more. Now, scientists discovered that it was a cause of a lot of death. Sometime in 1952 in London. Now, they did not discover it by detecting the presence or absence of sulfur dioxide. A small quantity of that is in every atmosphere. They discovered it by discovering that it sometimes occurred at a very high intensity in the atmosphere. And so they found out that it was causing, fatalities among humans by measuring the level of sulfur dioxide to the number of people that were dying per day. And they saw that people died more when there was a certain high level of sulfur dioxide in the air. So that's concomitant variation. Okay, so let's put some of these ideas to the test with some exercises. Now, this is a question. Kofi has had access to a piece of his card in the last few months. So this is an example of what? Yeah, so there's someone is raising his hand. That's Amankwa. Amankwa, can you answer the question? Or Abigail?
Please, as a common trend.
Okay, that's good. So the common thread running through all these acts is what? It's Kofi himself. So Kofi is a common thread running through the accident.
Hello.
Yes.
I think the answer is a common.
Come again. Yeah, so common thread. I think you say common thread. Yeah. Okay, so the next one. Now there's an unspoken understanding that those who were trained in European and American universities are better equipped for their jobs and should be given more promotion. So this is an example of what? Yeah, Shadrach.
Doc, relevant difference reasoning.
Okay, so please, could you explain? Give us the technicality.
Okay, so I would say that maybe it is argued that those specific people trained in European and American universities are better equipped for their jobs and should be given more promotions. So people see those people who have been specifically trained in Europe as those who can perform better if we employ them. So they are making the difference out of all employees.
Okay, so the issue is what let me see. So how many hands are raised here? Shadrach and okay. So normally when we are talking about relevant difference, we're looking for something that stands out from others. Something that stands out from others. But when we are talking about common thread, we're talking about something that is common something that is common to a number of phenomena, you know, equality or equality property or something else that is common to a number of phenomena. Yeah, so in this case, the issue is between relevant difference and common thread. Which one is it? Now you can see that we are talking about a number of universities. You know, we cannot determine the number, but let's assume we are talking about more than 100 European and American universities. And we're saying that those who've been trained in all these universities are back to Africa, and we should give them more promotion. We should place them higher than other people who are trained here. You know. So that tells you that we are looking at equality that runs through all the European and American universities. So that should suggest to you that it's a common thread. Okay. So
Doc,
relevant
please,
difference. Yes.
Doc, please, I'm not that clear.
Yeah. So the question the question you need to answer is what do you identify as being relevantly different, and what is it different from? Now, remember that when we talk about relevant difference, we are talking about something that is different from others. Something that is different from others. So in this case, what are those others? And what is that thing that is different from others? And then when we are talking about common thread, when we're talking about common thread, we're talking about something that is common. Common thread refers to something that is common to a number of things, you know, something that is common to a number of things. So, what does this question look like? Does it suggest, or what does it suggest? Does it suggest relevant difference or common thread? If you think it suggests relevant difference, then what is it that is relevant? What is it that is different? And what are those things it is different from? What is it that is different from the rest? So I'm just showing you how you can detect the answer.
Doc, please, I think the way they were trained is quite different from the rest.
Yeah, by the rest, you mean what? Is it those at home, those in Africa?
Yes, those in Africa. That is why they think that they should be, how do I put it? They should be given promotions. So it is presumed that the way they were trained outside makes them unique. So if we have um, 10 of 10 of let me see, we have 10 workers here, and we have 8 of them who were trained outside, they are specifically making the difference. You get it? So that is why I think it is relevant difference reasoning.
Okay. So what if someone tells you that that type of training is common to American and European universities. Therefore, it is a common thread running through those universities. So how do you respond to the person that it is rather relevant? So that is the idea. There are many American and European universities, and this common understanding is that those who are trained in those universities, are better equipped for their jobs. So you think it is relevant from the situation here, but the question is focusing on something that is running through the universities in Europe and America. So at the end of the day, you have to look at the question very well and then ask yourself what the examiner wants.
Okay. Understood, sir.
Situations where you normally have relevant difference are situations where only one thing is different from the rest. And then situations where you have common thread are situations where you have one thing that is common to a number of phenomena. Something is common to a number of phenomena. That's common thread. And for relevant difference reasons, it is mostly about something, just one thing, being different from other things. So that numerical difference can also be used in identifying which is which. All right, so the next question. Your computer is more likely to last longer if it is an Apple product. This is an example of what? Yeah, Gabriel.
I think it's relevant difference.
Come again.
Relevant
Come
difference.
again. Relevant difference. Okay, so he said relevant difference. And any other answer before I address it? So we have one answer, relevant difference. Please, you wanted to suggest an answer. Kendall Akron, do you have an answer?
False common thread.
False common thread. Okay, so we have relevant difference, false common thread. Amankwa, your hand is raised and your microphone is on. Do you want to suggest something? Okay, so now let's take a look at the problem. Your computer is more likely to last longer if it is an Apple product. So more likely to last longer. if it is an Apple product. Now, the first question to ask is why would it be able to last longer? Why would it be able to last? What would make an Apple product last longer? That's the first question. I think most of you have seen Apple products as well as other products. Other products like HP, Dell, and some other Lenovo, Asus, and the stuff, Sony, Toshiba, and the rest. So why do you think an Apple product is likely to last longer than its product? What do you think is chiefly responsible?
So their performance.
No, I mean when we're talking about lasting longer, we're talking about the hardware, not the software. What lasts longer in a product is the hardware. The software are those things that are put inside that are installed, to function in one way or the other. But they depend on the hardware. They are like spirits inside the body. So when we are talking about the durability of laptops or computers, we're talking about the computer hardware. That's the so if one hardware is projected to last longer than other hardware, then why is it possible for it to likely last longer than other hardware? And the answer is that it must have been made with more density of the same material as others. It must have been made with more density of the material that is used to make computers. So, if, for instance, you want a certain hardware to last longer, you might need to increase, the components of the hardware that will make it last longer. So, for example, if you want to build a house, you have to mix cement and sand to build the blocks. To build the blocks, you have to mix cement and sand at a certain ratio. So let's assume that you are mixing cement and sand at a ratio of 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. You'll bring a certain quantity of cement and mix it with 5 times the quantity in sand to make the block. So that's just an assumption, But when you want to mix cement for plastering, the plastering could be you could be mixing cement and sand at a ratio of 1 to 2 for plastering. So you bring 1 portion of cement and 2 portions of sand for plastering or for holding the blocks together. So that means it's a higher concentration of cement. Okay, now assuming that you see some of these flyovers and some of these interchanges, you can see the Tetekwashi interchange, you can see the flyover at Madina's Bengo Junction. So when you look at some of these flyovers, you see that it seems that the ratio of cement used in building those flyovers must have been very, very high, probably higher than the sand, because it looks like, it is concrete, but it looks like iron, it looks like steel. So in that case, there is a greater investment of cement or some other adhesive that holds things together. So in that case, when you look at the quantity of cement or the portions of cement mixed for a flyover, and then the quantity or the portions of cement mixed for a building block, you see that the investment of cement and the flyover is higher, per portion. So that is how it is for computer hardware. So if Apple products are projected to last longer than other products, then it means that a greater quantity of whatever makes the product stronger has been invested in the Apple product, the Apple product hardware. So what does that tell you? Does that tell you relevant difference, common threads, concomitant variation, false common threads? Yeah, so someone has raised his hand. Amankwa, you want to answer this time? What's the answer? Okay, so the answer is common thread. The answer is concomitant variation. Now it is concomitant variation because the manufacturers of Apple products have invested more of whatever makes hardware last longer compared to the other products. So it is concomitant variation because every company might have used it, but some companies have put more quantities of it than the other. So answer is concomitant variation. One of the reasons why Michael succeeds where others have failed is that he studies his problems carefully before taking action. This is an example of what? Michael succeeds where others have failed. And that's because he studies his problems carefully before taking action. But I think the major information is that Michael has succeeded where others have failed. So what is the answer? So that's relevant difference. Relevant. Michael is different from others. So that's how you know relevant difference. Something is different from others. Male soccer team from Cameroon are always filled with tall, hard-bodied male soccer teams from Cameroon are always filled with tall, hard-bodied men. My father said it is because of the prominence of plantain, a key provider of zinc in the average Cameroonian diet. This is an example of a what? Yeah, BC.
I think concomitant variation.
Yeah, so why do you think it's concomitant variation? Give us the technical analysis.
Please, the question again.
Yeah, so explain why you think it's concomitant variation.
Okay. I think since the statement states that male soccer teams from Cameroon are always so here the statement is throwing light on not a single team in Cameroon, not maybe three or more teams in Cameroon. So yeah, I think so it is not pointing to a specific, let's say, one male team in Cameroon, but rather a lot of male teams in Cameroon.
Okay. So, but that doesn't answer why it is, you know, concomitant variation. If it is concomitant variation, then it is varying from something else. What is it varying from? Because the answer you provided suggests common thread, that it is common to Cameroonian people. But if you want to maintain concomitant variation, then what what is it being varied from? Concomitant variation suggests that it is varying from something else. So what is it differing from? What is it different from? What is it varying from? There are variations. What is the other side of the variation? At one side of the variation, you have Cameroonian teams. So I think I will help you with that. So everyone eats plantain. So there's plantain all over the world, not just in Cameroon. So if plantain is responsible for the type of strength we are seeing in Cameroonian players, then it suggests that they are eating it in more quantity. They are eating it in more quantity compared to others. So if they are eating plantain in more quantity, although everyone is eating it, then that's concomitant variation. So the answer is concomitant variation. Everyone eats it, but the Cameroonians eat it more. It has been discovered that living longer is associated with low protein intake at middle age and moderate to high protein intake in old age. It has been discovered that living longer is associated with low protein intake at middle age and moderate to high protein intake in old age. This study was actually done by Levin et al. 2014. So this is an example of what? Yeah, Shadrach.
Concomitant variation.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's concomitant variation. Everyone takes protein. Everyone takes protein. So if protein is gonna be responsible for something, then it has to be about the degree of protein intake. It has to be about the degree of protein intake. All right. So we are done with the three informal patterns of strategy of causal rate. So what we just did are the ways that our brains normally identify cause. Everyone you know, every human being employs those three strategies. Every human being uses relevant difference, common thread, and concomitant variation. Those strategies are, according to John Stuart Mill, those strategies are built into your mind. They are like structures in your mind. So you use them every minute of the day. You use them to identify millions of causes. That's why we call them the informal patterns of causal rate. Okay, so let's look at causal fallacies or fallacies of causal reasoning or bad causal reasoning. These fallacies are committed when the link between an alleged cause and effect depends on a causal link that does not exist. The fallacies are committed when the link between an alleged cause and effect depends on a causal link that does not exist. So the first one is the one we call the post hoc ego propter hoc. The post hoc ego propter hoc. Or the fallacy of inferring causality from chronology. Inferring causality from chronology. What is chronology? Chronology means the passage of time. Chronology means the passage of time. So just because something happened before another thing doesn't mean that it caused it. Example, for the first time today, I took beans for breakfast and I performed wonderfully in my mathematics test. For the first time today, I took beans for breakfast. I've never taken beans in my life, but this morning I met someone eating beans and I decided to eat some of it just before my mathematics test, and I performed wonderfully in my mathematics test. Therefore, the breakfast of beans is very crucial to mathematical property. So just because I encountered beans before my mathematics test, I am tempted to conclude that the beans must have been responsible for my mathematics performance. So we call it the post hoc ego propter hoc. Let's look at another example. Okay, we don't have many examples here. So now, for beings to improve your mathematics performance has no foundation at all. It's just superstitious reasoning. So you can classify that as superstition. It's just like someone who says, I went to the native doctor before the election, therefore the native doctor is responsible for my election victory. All right. So just because something happened before another doesn't mean that it caused it. Then we have non-causal pro-causal, non-causal pro-causal, or the fallacy of exchanging or confusing cause for effect. The fallacy of confusing cause for effect. Example: Michael is a poor student because he performs poorly in examination. Michael is a poor student because he performs poorly in examination. So that's a wrong way of looking at it. To correct that fallacy, you would rather say that Michael performs poorly in examinations because he's a poor student. Michael performs poorly in examinations because he's a poor student. So it is the other way around. Now let's look at oversimplified cause. Oversimplified cause. Now this occurs when there are many causes and the argument identifies only one of them as cause. When there are many causes and the argument identifies only one of them as cause. Example, the Cameroonian team won a trophy because their coach is paid a higher salary. The Cameroonian team won a trophy because their coach is paid a higher salary. So you might increase the salary of your coach, and yet you don't win the trophy. So this is an example of an oversimplified cause. There are many things responsible for a team's victory apart from the coach's high salary. Now the high salary might be a factor. It could be a factor, even a major factor. It could make the coach more serious and other things. But at the end of the day, it is the players who are in the field, and the coach doesn't get to even speak for what. Then false common thread. False common thread. When we infer a common thread as a cause when it is not. When we infer a common thread as a cause when it is not. Example, all the academically bright guys in my class have cars, so I'll get a car as part of my desire to be academically bright. All the academically bright guys in my class have cars, so I'll get a car as part of my desire to be academically bright. Okay, so confusing correlation with causation. Confusing correlation with causation. Now, just because two things occur together, just because two things often occur together doesn't mean the direct causal relationship is real. Bring them. Example, each time a car moves, we see smoke coming from the exhaust tube. Each time a car moves, we see smoke coming from the exhaust tube. Therefore, the smoke causes the car to. So, to correct it, we would rather say the smoke is not what causes the car to move. Both the movement and the smoke are caused by the engine combustion. Okay. Now let's look at slippery slope. Slippery slope. When we suggest that a relatively insignificant event will cause a more significant event, which in turn will cause an even more significant event, and the order of significance continues to increase without adequate justification as to why each significant event will lead to a more significant event. So what you have is that a progressively dubious chain of premise, usually consequence, is often employed to support a conclusion or claim. So this is the argument that a particular event will cause a more serious event, which in turn will cause a more serious event, and so on, without a justification as to such escalation. Another explanation. It is a fallacy of arguing that if A is allowed, it will trigger a set of events that eventually lead to death. And it is only a matter of time to go from A to Z, to slip down a slippery slope from A to Z. Now, this should not be a fallacy if the causal movement from A to Z is justified. it becomes a fallacy if the causal movement is not justified or justifiable, which means that it is fatalism, an extreme version of determinism. Look at the first example of slippery slope. If Donald Trump becomes the president, America will fight many wars. This was an argument made by Democrats in the USA during the 2016 presidential election campaign. So after this, Donald Trump became the president, but America didn't fight more wars than it was fighting already. So it means the argument was a slippery slope. Just elect him and then the whole country will slip down a slippery slope to war. Now, so we know Donald Trump is aggressive. He talks, sometimes he talks anyhow, but for him to put the country in several wars is another issue. Second example, it is wrong to believe in God because then you would eventually believe in not just God, but all kinds of spirits. And then you come to believe that spirits have all kinds of power, superstition. And then you come to believe that inanimate objects have spirits, which is animism. And then you also come to believe that everything with spirits and has the spirits and power to do something. So I'm not able to read that because I am being blocked by my minimized window. Okay, so now this another slippery slope. If you believe in God, it will lead you to an escalating progression of crazy beliefs, terrible beliefs. So just believe in God and then it will lead you down a slippery slope of increasingly alarming beliefs from the least to the worst. All right. Now the third example is quite interesting. I cannot allow my child to go outdoors and play in the compound. This is because if I do, she will jump fence and go into the street. If she goes into the street, she will run away with any stranger. If she runs away with any stranger, then I'll never see her again. If I never see her again, I will be miserable for the rest of my life. If I'm miserable for the rest of my life, I'll commit suicide. So, for the purpose of the avoidance of suicide, I will not allow my child to play outdoors on compound. So this argument assumes that just by allowing this child to play outdoors, it will lead to the suicide of the mother. Okay, so let's do some exercises for the last time. I noticed that most of the great people in this country attended the Achimota High School. So I will attend that school because I want to be like them. This is an example of what?
False common trend.
Come again.
False common trend.
False common thread. So explain briefly, a brief explanation.
Because the fact that all great men went to Ashimota doesn't mean when you go to Ashimota, you necessarily become a great man as well.
Okay, that's good. So any other answers before we move on? Is someone else raising their hand? Uh, okay, so we have false common thread. All right, so the argument is assuming that there's something common to those who attend the Chimota High School. All right. So Russia's military is more powerful than the terrorist organization because the military destroyed the organization last week. This is an example of what? Anyone with an idea of the answer? It seems someone is speaking, but the person's connectivity seems to be weak. Is that all bright? All bright, are you the one who want to answer the question? Okay, so this is a non-causal pro-causal because it is the other way around. Russia's military is not more powerful because it destroyed the terrorist organization. Rather, Russia destroyed the terrorist organization because Russia military is more powerful. So it is the other way around. It's a non-causal pro-causal. You have to be more powerful than the terrorist organization in order to defeat it. If you are not more powerful than the terrorist organization, then you cannot defeat. So Russia destroyed the terrorist organization because Russia is more powerful. All right. I remember you visited a native doctor in January. That must be the problem behind the problems you are having with your beef. This is an example of what? Okay, so this is a post hoc ego propter hoc. It is a post hoc ego propter hoc. There might be no relationship between visiting the native doctor and the outcome of your business. You can attribute Gabriel's success as a lawyer to the support he receives from his wife. This is an example of what? You can attribute Gabriel's success as a lawyer to the support he receives from his wife. This is an example of what? Any answer? So this is oversimplified cause. It is oversimplified cause because the support of a wife cannot make Gabriel a successful lawyer. Gabriel needs much more than the support of his wife to become, a successful lawyer. Each time I win a game of chess at a club, I happen to have mistakenly used the wrong key to attempt to lock my front door. So whenever I mistakenly use the wrong key to lock my front door, I know I'll win a game of chess at a club. This is an example of what? Okay, so this is confusing correlation with causation. You know. Now it is confusing correlation with causation because it talks about each time I win a game of chess. So it's not just one time, it's several times. And those several times, these events keep going together, using the wrong key and winning a game of chess. So that's correlation. And now he's interpreting the correlation as causation. This is the end of the class. Next week, we're going to look at informal fallacy. Now, I'm going to answer any questions you might have about one particular issue or the other. But if you have any questions about the whole class or a section of the lecture, then you will have to watch the recording. So if you have any question about a specific issue, then you can bring it up right now. Let me address it before I put off the recording, and then I leave the class to retrieve the recording and then upload it and then send you the link. Any questions? Okay, so since there are no questions, I'm going to put off the recording. Stopping the recording.